Speak the words of Lorgar, and you shall live forever in the glory of chaos. Speak them not, and every one of you shall die today. This was an ultimatum made at the gates of the capital city of Moeg 6 before a word-bearer's assault. Hello, and welcome back to the Wisdom Warhammer channel. And in today's video, I'll be going over the history and structure of the Word-Bearers Legion. I will go over their time during the Great Crusade before Lorgar was found, and then their time during the Great Crusade after Lorgar was found. I will then go over their time during the Horus Heresy, and at the end I will go over the 17th Legion structure. Like in my previous videos, I do not own the artwork in the video, and all things Warhammer owned by Games Workshop and Black Library. So, with the intro out of the way, let's get the video started, shall we? The Word-Bearers were named the Imperial Heralds before Lorgar was found, and they stood apart from other legions even at the beginning of their service. They fought with utter devotion, and the first recruits of the 17th Legion were from the nations that the Emperor exterminated on Terra. The recruits were told the crimes of their forebears, and they were told the price for forgiveness. From this kind of mindset, they fought wars different from the other legions, as they fought for righteousness, but the Imperial Heralds fought to right the wrongs of their forebears, and to spread the Imperial truth. Due to the dour and merciless nature, the 7th Legion didn't build bonds with the other legions because they saw no joy in war and conquest. The only thing that they cared for was getting their duty done, and they did not respect their enemies or acknowledge them. The 17th only wanted to break them and make them repent to the Emperor and the Imperium. When the Imperial Heralds arrived at the walls of religious cults or fortresses of demagogues, a lone warrior would meet with the leaders. He would wear a skull helmet and black armor bearing a eagle-winged mace and would preach the word of truth from the Emperor and the futile choice of resistance. It was very common for these lone warriors to be killed, which resulted in a brutal attack from the 17th Legion. But some of these kingdoms and cults would see the power of the lone warrior and would renounce their beliefs and would give themselves to the Imperium and the Imperial truth. After the 17th conquered these people, they would burn the false idols of these people and would collect all religious texts, words of sorcery, and any works that were irrational. If there were people who still worshipped these false idols, they would put them upon pyres that were upon the books and idols that the Imperial Heralds had collected and would be burned to death. They did this kind of conquest throughout Terra, and the other legions would give them a second name, which is the Iconoclasts. The records of the 17th and the early years of the Great Crusade were unknown until Lorgar Aurelian was found on the feudal world of Colchis. Lorgar was the religious leader of the people of Colchis, and when the Emperor arrived, Lorgar had prostrated himself in front of his father, with the Primarch of the 15th, Magnus the Red, being present. Lorgar would be taken under the wing of the Crimson King, and he would learn the ways of the Imperium, and after some time, Lorgar would meet his legion. The Imperial Herald's chaplains would learn from Lorgar, who was very pious, and when they began to conquer worlds they were effective, but they were very slow during the Great Crusade. The reason for this was because they were doing what they did on Terra, but on a more massive scale, and it would take them a decade or so on each planet that they conquered. They would burn the temples down and collect all blasphemous texts or books and burn them, and then the word of Lorgar, the 17th, would convert millions to the worship of the Emperor. They would change their name to the Word-Bearers, and the greatest of the chaplains would also write works on the Emperor's worship, and would also do sermons and speeches which would convert even more people. Eventually, Lorgar wrote the infamous Leticatico Divinatis, and would be the foundation of the Imperial cult. Eventually, the Imperial War Council looked at the reports of the Word-Bearers' crusade fleets being very slow. They sent envoys to find out the reason for the slow momentum. As the envoys in the Imperial War Council reported their findings to the War Council, The emperor was informed, and he sent a force of custodians to tell them to stop with the conversion of the worlds. The word bearers did not listen, and then the emperor sadly had to do something that he didn't want to do, but it was necessary. Upon the world of Kur, the city of Monarchia was the perfect city in the eyes of Lorgar and his legion, and the emperor had chosen the city to punish the word bearers and their father. Instead of using one of the more brutal legions, the emperor ordered Robute Gilliman and his legion to burn down the city of Monarchia. The Ultramarines did this, and with the word bearers receiving multiple distress signals from the planet, they arrived. When they landed, the entire 17th Legion and their Primarch stood in the ashes of the city in front of the Emperor and Robute Gilliman and the 13th. The Emperor chastised Lorgar and the word bearers, and to shame them even further, the Emperor used his psychic power to completely force the entire word bearers legion, which numbered at 100,000 Marines, to kneel in the ashes of Monarchia. The Emperor said to Lorgar and his legion that he is not a god and he should not be worshipped as such, and left. After the word bearers walked through the city of Ash, they were saddened and were in limbo when they returned to their ships with the evacuees of Monarchia. Lorgar had locked himself in his chambers and began to question everything he held in high regard. Then the two manipulative advisors to the Primarch, Corferon, the first captain, and Erebus, the high chaplain, came to Lorgar in his low moment. They told him that they knew where to find the truth, and it would be located in the Cadia system. Lorgar took the 1,301st Expeditionary Fleet and the Serrated Suns chapter along with him to the Cadia system, but unknown to them, this would lead them down a path of darkness. When the word bearers arrived at the planet of Cadia, Lorgar met his guide, and her name was Ingethel, and she was responsible for showing this lost flock the truth. Ingethel was elevated to demonhood by the sacrifice of a custodian that was stationed with the word bearers and 10 regular humans. Ingethel, the Transcended, showed the Serrated Suns chapter of the word bearers the failure and fall of the Eldar Empire. The demon explained that the Eldar failed to embrace the primordial truth and the birth of the Dark Prince Slaanesh, and showed them the whole thing. The word bearers watched the events happen that created the Eye of Terror. After they were shown this, Ingethel told the word bearers to not follow the path of the Eldar, and the only way for humanity to survive is to accept chaos. I should mention that during this journey, the Serrated Suns who went in, some of them died, and then the rest became the first possessed Space Marines. When they came back from their pilgrimage, they told of what they saw to Lorgar, and he was happy that he found the primordial truth, and the imperial truth was a lie. When the remaining Serrated Suns and their Primarch returned to the fleet, Lorgar ordered a cyclonic torpedo to be fired at Cadia, and now Lorgar knew the truth, and he would spread its word. The primordial truth spread through the word bearers legion, and from this they were the first legion to fall to chaos. For the next 40 years, they would enlighten humanity across the stars in secret, and eventually they would sway some of the legions to their side. The word bearers created the warrior lodges that spread the word of chaos across the legion, which convinced a lot of legionaries. After a few decades, the Horus Heresy would begin, and the corruption of chaos would spread even further. But I will now go over the notable combat engagements that the word bearers fought in during the Great Crusade. I will start with the fall of Auric. This was one of the last major battles in the closing years in the unification wars of Terra, and the 17th was named the Imperial Heralds at the time. They would fight against a religious empire in the South Arctic lands, and these people thought that they were the chosen of Terra's blighted children. The Empire of Auric was in a mountain cave system that was vast with heavy weapons and walls, but they were no match for the 17th Legion. A legionary of the 17th gave the people of Oric a choice to bend the knee to the Emperor and join the Imperium or die. They refused, and from this the Legion unleashed their firepower. Macro bombers came out of the snow-cold skies and dropped bombs upon the mountain. Siege tanks fired salves of shells into the sides of the mountain, and the Imperial heralds marched into the breaches of the mountain empire and slaughtered all in their way. After 3 solar hours, the last remains of the Auric Empire were huddled up in the dark and trapped. They wondered what fate awaited them, and it would come in the form of the Ashen Circle chapter, and all would be burned to death. Then the Legion would overload the geothermal generators, which flooded the caverns with lava, destroying everything within the mountain. Now, this next battle was short, but this planet had the city of Monarchia, and it was the Battle of Kur, and we don't have much info on this war, sadly. Now in this next engagement, Lorgar and the Serrated Suns were on the pilgrimage, and Corferon and a massive force of word bearers would purge the planet of 4716. This was shortly after the rebuke of the word bearers upon the surface of Kur when Monarchia was burned down. Now, when the Legion landed, the first captain, Corferon, mentioned that these people worshipped a heathen deity called the Storm Lord. For 12 hours of orbital bombardment, the last remaining city was left, and a force of 5 full companies of the word bearers attacked. This force made their way to the main temple. The captain of the 34th Company, named Sor Telegrun, talked with the head priest, and he was surprised to see that the people of 4716 worshipped the Emperor as a god. As Telegrun and the priest spoke, Corferon and 100 Terminators teleported into the chambers and spoke to the captain. Then, First Chaplain Erebus and Lorgar materialized into the room, and the Primarch explained to Captain Sor Telegrun that the people of 4716 had a copy of Lorgar's book, which was about the worship of the Emperor. But at the end, the survivors of the planet were killed by a barrage of storm bolters, and from this, the purge of 4716 was complete. This next battle was the campaign that showed the word bearers' renewal after the raising of Monarchia, and was called the Pyre of Koronos. The system of Koronos was located in the eastern fringe of the galaxy, near a warp route, and at first the Imperium thought that the trio of planets would be brought into the Imperium easily. But this was wrong, because when a scout fleet arrived, they began to talk, and then comms went dark. Eventually, a nearby Ultramarines fleet arrived and saw that the system had been through a war. When the Ultramarine fleet talked to the last ship of the scout fleet, they said that a group of renegade psychers mind-controlled the Imperial troops. The astropaths of the fleet called for aid, and a chapter of the word bearers arrived, and it would be led by Chapter Master Hasdrubal. This chapter of the 17th had launched attacks upon the trio of worlds, and from this they would launch orbital bombardments upon the planets, which scoured them of life. Sometime in the future, this system would be a mustering ground for the traitors during the Horus Heresy. Now, the final battle I will go over was named the Compliance of Fortrina Quintus, and this was a very interesting compliance action. As a word-bearer's fleet was fighting in the nearby system against orcs, the rulers in the imperial world of Fortrina Quintus rebelled. Hearing about this, Lorgar sent 2,000 legionaries led by Captain Jarulek and wanted the world back under imperial rule within 3 months. When Jarulek's force arrived, they would build fortifications upon the planet, and they found out that the people of the planet had been living in very bad poverty. Jarulek and his men noticed that the rulers had become even more fatter and richer while the people slaved away. The people of the planet could not do anything because the rulers had a disciplined and technologically advanced army. The word-bearers pushed the forces of the rulers back inch by inch, and the people of the planet began to fight alongside the 17th, and the number would reach past 1 million. Then, when the word bearers and their mortal troops began to attack the last bastion of the rulers, the mortals would be slaughtered in the thousands due to the defenses, while the word bearers lost very little casualties. Eventually, Jarwilek captured the last ruler, and then in front of the bloodied mortals, he threw the ruler and he was ripped apart by the horde of his former subjects. Then the word bearers began to convert the people into the traitor side, until the adepts of the Ministorum arrived and were horrified that all those people were killed. They sent word to the Emperor about what happened, but they still saw the world as useful to the Imperium. Now, going into the word bearers' time during the Horus Heresy, and like always, I will talk a little bit about the drop site massacre and what the 17th did. They mostly fought the Raven Guard, and during the battle, the Gal Vorbak, which are word bearers that were possessed and served as shock troops, revealed themselves during the massacre. But sadly, a lot of them were slaughtered when Korax decided to charge the front lines. Then, after the drop site massacre, the word bearers then went to the world of Calth to deal with the Ultramarines. At this point, the Ultramarines did not know about Horus's rebellion, and the 17th used this to their advantage. They would launch a bunch of cultists around the regular Imperial Guard on Calth, and Lorgar ordered his legion to mingle around the Ultramarines. When Corpharon then arrived and the legion was in position, they would begin to kill the Ultramarines and their allies upon the world of Calth and in orbit. They did a lot of damage, and the Primarch of the 13th was rumored to be killed, but Gilman came back and gathered his force and told his forces to kill every single word bearer and cultist they could find. Now, the word bearers and their cultists did horrifying things during this battle by skinning and mounting Ultramarine corpses upon vehicles and Titans. Now, Lorgar and his Dark Apostles used the sacrifices and the emotional shock of the betrayal to create the Ruin Storm, and Erebus was the conductor of this ritual, which cut the galaxy in half. Corpharon led a force to use the defense matrix of Calth on the sun in the system, which caused massive radiation storms. From this, there was an underground war on Calth in which the Loyalists won, and while this force of word bearers fought underground, the rest of the Legion and Lorgar made their way to join up with Angron and the World Eaters. Now, these two traitor legions fought in the realm of Ultramar, and it would be called the Shattered Crusade. During the Shattered Crusade, the word bearers would be empowered by chaos, and then at the end of the Shattered Crusade, Lorgar had given his brother Angron and the 12th Legion to the Blood God on Nuceria. After the Shattered Crusade, Lorgar and the word bearers were ordered to muster at Ullanor for the final push towards Terra. Lorgar saw Horus as weak to lead the traitors and not the chosen one of the Chaos Gods, and tried to usurp the War Master, but failed and was exiled. With Lorgar being exiled alongside a force of word bearers, but only 2,000 word bearers under the command of Zardu Lyak went with the War Master and the other traitors to Terra to offer their services. There was a smaller force of word bearers under the command of Zedek Mordekar, who assisted the Sons of Horus in the recapture of Chthonia. During the siege of Terra, Zardu and his force of legionaries assisted in the shadows by doing sacrifices which summoned demons and gave them chaos boons. After Horus was killed, the word bearers retreated, and with the word bearers legion spread throughout the galaxy. They would participate in wars, and the 17th, including their Primarch, would go into the Eye of Terra or the Maelstrom eventually. Now, going into the notable combat engagements that the word bearers participated in during the Horus Heresy, I will start with the Bitter War, and this resulted in the death of the word bearers' home world. But to explain this small war, it would start during the Horus Heresy and it would end during the Great Scouring. Now, the word bearers would fight 3 Loyalist Legion forces, including the Inquisition, and Imperial Fists, Iron Hands, and Ultramarines, and it was pretty much a mass invasion of cultists. The Iron Hands launched all kinds of forbidden weapons from the gates of hell, and the 17th Legion warriors held out, but eventually 2 fleets of Imperial Fists and Ultramarines arrived with a small contingent of the Inquisition. The three forces completely wiped out the Word Bearers, and the commander of the Ultramarines force, named Captain Remus Ventanius, placed a standard upon Colchis. Then, with him and his force leaving the destroyed planet, the ships of the Ultramarines and the Inquisition then launched cyclonic torpedoes, which completely destroyed Colchis. Now, the Second Battle of Parmar was an interesting one, and it involved the Sons of Horus and Dark Mechanicum Titan legions. The Word Bearers gave the other traitor forces during this battle a pretty big garrison that defended the world of Paramar until the world of Paramar was taken over by loyalists. Now, I did talk about the Battle of Zapeth in my Dark Angels video, but I will go over it again. With the Night Haunter on the loose, the Dark Angels in the line were on the hunt for him, and the planet of Zapeth was one of the planets where they suspected that Kurz was at. With a decent force of Word Bearers and World Eaters upon the world doing horrible rituals, a Dreadwing force landed upon the world, and the traitors tried to fight them off but failed. The last battle I will talk about is the Battle of Honorum, which involved a force of scattered Ultramarines under the command of Arcanius Athendius, a Captain Praetor. The Word Bearers held out for 3 weeks and were ignored by the War Master and other traitor forces, and they would begin to summon demons due to them being desperate. Seeing this, the Ultramarines then launched forbidden weapons from the Dark Age of technology. The 13th Legion force used these weapons, which destroyed the surface of the planet, and the worst damage was to the grand cities, and no Word Bearers survived. Now, going into the structure of the 17th Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, I will start with the hierarchy. Lorgar was at the top as the Primarch, and under him were the captains of the companies, and these companies numbered at 500 to 3,000 warriors. Now, one of the more interesting things about the hierarchy and the Word Bearers was the chaplains, who were the spiritual leaders of the Legion, and I assume they had a lot of power within the Legion command. These chaplains were taught by Lorgar, Corpharon, and Erebus, and these Word Bearers would eventually become Dark Apostles during the Horus Heresy. Now, the 17th Legion did have specialist units, and I will start with the Ashen Circle, who worked alongside the Destroyer squads. They would be tasked with destroying the religious work, killing the priests, and destroying divine relics, and they mostly used flame and chain blades. Now, this next unit was not used in combat, but only when the Word Bearers Legion was purged, which happened 3 times, the first 2 by the order of Lorgar, and the 3rd time by Corpharon. This unit was called the Brotherhood, and we don't have much info on how they would be structured and what they did other than purge the Legion, but I assume they're just a bunch of regular legionaries. Now, the Harbingers of Death are the bodyguards of Erebus that were formed during the Battle of Calth, and I assume they're still active today. The Zart Haravel are the pilot cadre of the Word Bearers Legion, and due to the small info we have, they were still willing to sacrifice themselves and are willing to fly on the most dangerous hazards, and were so skilled that they could perform combat missions that test the endurance of the Astartes. And when the Horus Heresy began, they gave themselves to chaos and the demons, which further enhanced their skills. Now, the last unit I will talk about is the Anarchy, which only consisted of the Legion Dreadnoughts, and they did spread the word of the Imperial truth like their brothers. And when the Legion gave themselves to chaos, I assume some of them would give themselves to chaos. But there was a rumor that a single Word Bearer's Dreadnought remained loyal and was locked in a dark chamber. Now, the size of the Word Bearers was pretty big, and the number was at 100,000 in the early years of the Great Crusade. Now, when the Horus Heresy was about to begin, the Legion was numbered at 140,000 legionaries. The Legion fleet had 116 warships, and within this fleet they had 9 Gloriana-class battleships, and they had gotten them from other legions during the Horus Heresy. Now, there's nothing really special about the Word Bearers, because they're a bunch of priests that are superhuman and relied upon the powers of chaos during the Horus Heresy, and spent more time converting people than fighting in the Great Crusade, so we have very little info on them. Now we have gotten to the end of the video on the history and structure of the Warbearers Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button and share it with someone who would like this content. If you are new and would like to see more, hit the subscribe button and click the bell to be notified for when a new video comes out. Now, I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you in the next video, which will be on the masculinity of the Lion, which will be out next Friday. Now, with that being said, this is Wisdom Warhammer, signing off.